She found his lost dog at 1 a.m., and the Mafia boss followed the GPS tag straight to her door. The dog found her at 1:03 in the morning, and it was already bleeding when she heard it. She was walking home from a double shift with her scrubs still damp and her sneakers hitting that wet, cold sound on the sidewalk, and she was not thinking about anything except making it through her front door before she started crying. Brooklyn was empty at that hour. Just the orange glow of streetlights and the smell of November and the weight of a day that had taken more than it had any right to take. And then she heard it. A sound so low and so old that it stopped her body before her mind caught up. Coming from the space between a chain-link fence and a dumpster. The sound of something that had been hurting alone long enough to stop asking for help. She crouched down. She pulled out her phone. The flashlight found him, an Irish wolfhound. Steel gray and enormous, lying on his side with his left shoulder dark and matted with blood that had gone cold in the air. He looked at her with eyes that were exhausted and still, and somehow impossibly trusting. She should have kept walking. Every sensible part of her knew that. But Evelyn Cross had never once in her life walked past something that needed her hands. She took off her jacket. She wrapped it around his shoulder. She said quietly, "Okay, I have you. You are going to be okay." And she meant it the way she always meant it, which was not as a promise, but as a decision. She did not know that the moment she moved him, a GPS signal updated on a screen 6 miles away in a Tribeca penthouse. She did not know that a man she had never met was already putting on his coat. She did not know that in 44 minutes there would be a knock at her door that would change the entire shape of her life. She only knew that the dog was hurt. And she was there. And that had always been enough reason. Her name was Evelyn Cross, 32 years old, veterinary technician at a small animal clinic on Greenpoint Avenue in Brooklyn. She had worked there for 6 years. She knew every regular client by name and could draw blood from a terrified cat without getting scratched, and once spent her entire lunch break sitting on the floor of exam room 3, holding a golden retriever named Biscuit while his owner said goodbye. She was not the kind of woman people noticed at first glance. She was not loud, and she did not fill rooms, and she kept her dark red hair pulled up because, in her line of work, a loose ponytail was asking for trouble. But her hands. People who worked with her noticed her hands eventually. They were steady in a way that could not be faked. Steady in the way that only happens when you have learned to keep your fear so deep inside you that the animal on the table never feels it. Evelyn Cross had that kind of steady. What she also had, as of 11:17 that evening, was an eviction notice in her jacket pocket. She had been carrying it for 4 hours without opening it a second time. She had read it once, standing in the hallway outside her apartment, and she had understood every word. Her landlord had filed a complaint, claiming she violated 3 clauses in her rental agreement. None of it was true. All of it was legal. His name was Douglas Hale, 40 years old, real estate investor. He smiled with his entire face and meant none of it. They had dated for 14 months, and she had ended it 8 months ago, calmly, in a coffee shop on a Tuesday, because she had finally understood the difference between someone who loves you and someone who needs to own you. He had sat across the table with that smile and said he understood completely. He had nodded. He had wished her well. 3 months later, he bought her building. She found out when his name appeared on the new management company letterhead. By the time she understood what was happening, the lease renewal had come with a 40% increase. A complaint had been filed with the Veterinary Licensing Board, anonymous, citing medication mismanagement, and her boss had called her into the office to explain that there would be a review. Douglas had also, she would later learn, called her clinic's largest donor personally and expressed concern about the quality of care. He had not raised his voice. He had not threatened anyone. He had simply made phone call after phone call with that same reasonable smile, pulling threads and watching her life unravel one careful legal inch at a time. And the worst part was that he had done it so slowly, so quietly, so plausibly, that she had spent 3 months wondering if she was imagining it. She had not cried yet. She was saving that for when she got home. And then she found the dog. She crouched in the dark and she worked with what she had. Scissors from her scrub's pocket, the small trauma kit she carried in her bag because 6 years of this work had taught her that you never knew. She cleaned the wound, a 3-inch laceration across his left shoulder, the kind of cut that came from a blade, not an accident. She filed that thought away. She closed the wound the best she could with what she had. The dog watched her the entire time, not struggling, not afraid. Just watching. "You're going to be okay," she told him. She believed it. She had to believe it. On a night when everything in her own life was being systematically taken apart, she needed one thing to be fixable. On his collar was a silver tag. No name, no number. Just a small rectangle of black embedded in the leather, pulsing the faintest green. A GPS tracker, active, right now. Someone knew exactly where this dog was, and they had not come yet. She looked at the tag. She looked at the wound. She picked him up. It was 1:19 in the morning when she got him up 3 flights of stairs and onto her kitchen floor. 44 minutes later, someone knocked. Her apartment was small and warm and entirely hers. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people, a shelf of plants on the window ledge, and a string of lights above the counter, and a small framed print above the sink that said in plain letters, "Stay." She had bought it the week she left Douglas. She told herself it was a reminder to be strong. She did not yet understand what it was really for. 3 blocks away, Douglas Hale was sitting in his car outside her building. He did this sometimes. Not every night, but enough nights that anyone watching would have called it what it was. He did not think of it as surveillance. He thought of it as making sure. He had worked very hard to put her in a position where she had nowhere left to go, and he needed to know she was still there when the time came to offer her a way out. His way out. On his terms. The lights in her 3rd-floor window were still on at 1 in the morning, and that annoyed him. She was supposed to be broken by now. Quiet women like Evelyn Cross were supposed to fold after the first real pressure. She had not folded. She kept showing up for work every morning with her chin level and her hands steady, and it made him feel something corrosive and ungovernable that he did not have an honest name for. He was so focused on her window that he did not see the black SUV turn onto her street. He did not see it park. He did not see the 3 men who got out. He did not see the one in the charcoal coat stand at the entrance to her building and look up at the same window Douglas was watching. He was looking at the light. He did not see the man who owned the dark. Back in her kitchen, Evelyn pressed the last piece of tape into place and sat back on her heels. The wound was clean. The dog's breathing had steadied. She looked at the GPS tag again, and she was still deciding what to do about it when the knock came. 3 knocks. Not frantic, not polite. The kind of knock that does not ask if you are home. It simply arrives. She went to the peephole first because her mother had taught her that at 19, and she had never once forgotten it. What she saw through the warped glass was a man, very tall, Charcoal coat, expensive without being loud. Dark hair, clean cut. She could not see his face, but she could see his jaw. Still. Set, and two men behind him standing in the hallway, like they had been placed there and were not going anywhere. Her hand was on the handle. Every part of her said, "Do not open this door." And then the dog made a sound behind her. Low, deep in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. She opened it. The man looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then his eyes went past her and found the dog. Something moved in his face. Fast, controlled, gone before she could name it. But she had spent 6 years reading animals who could not speak, and she caught it in the fraction of a second before he put it away. Relief so enormous, it was almost grief. "Is he alive?" the man said. Not a question. A man checking a report. "Yes," Evelyn said. His shoulder needed to be cleaned and closed. He lost blood, but not critically. He will need proper sutures in the morning. The man looked at her then. Really looked. And for a reason she could not explain, she did not look away. "Who are you?" he said. "The person who found him," she said. "Who are you?" A silence that had weight in it. His name was James Mercer. 38 years old. He ran an organization that controlled the majority of New York Harbor's illicit shipping lanes. 3 warehouses in Red Hook, 11 commercial properties in Lower Manhattan. And the loyalty, or fear, which in his world were mostly the same thing, of over 200 people who would have done whatever he asked without hesitation or question. He had not said please to anyone in a very long time. "His name is Ghost," James said. His voice was quieter than she expected from a man that size. Evelyn exhaled without meaning to. "That is what I have been calling him," she said. "I did not know his name." James looked at her again with that same 3-second examination, not the cataloging kind, but the kind that meant something had landed in an unexpected place inside him. Then he said, "Can I come in?" Still not quite a question, but closer. Evelyn stepped back. She could not have explained why. She was exhausted and frightened, and she had an eviction notice in her pocket, and a strange dog on her kitchen floor, and something about the way this man said his dog's name made her move aside without thinking. James Mercer walked into her apartment. He passed his 2 men without a word, and they stayed in the hallway without being told to. He walked through the narrow entry and into the kitchen, and he stopped. Ghost lifted his head. His tail moved once, heavy and slow, the way a dog moves when it is hurt but not afraid. James crouched down, all the way down, one knee on her kitchen floor, coat and everything, the kind of crouching that does not care about the cost of the clothes. He put his hand on Ghost's head very gently, and he stayed there. He did not speak. Evelyn stood in the kitchen doorway and watched a man who controlled an empire put his forehead against a dog's forehead and simply breathe. She did the only thing she could think to do. She filled the kettle. She did not ask if he wanted tea. She just filled it and put it on because she needed something to do with her hands. After a long moment, James looked up at her. "You cleaned and closed this yourself," he said. "You are a veterinarian." "Veterinary technician," she said. "There is a clinic 2 blocks from here. I've been there 6 years." He looked at the wound, the gauze, the tape, the clean edges she had managed by phone flashlight and kitchen counter. Then he looked at her. "That is good work," he said. It was such a plain thing to say. Not a compliment designed to land. Just an observation, stated simply from a man who apparently said what he saw and nothing more. Evelyn did not understand why it hit her harder than 3 times its size would have. "He needs proper sutures in the morning," she said. "I can take him in at 7 when the clinic opens." James nodded. He was still on the floor. He had not moved. "Sit down," she said. "You will give yourself a cramp." He looked at her with an expression she would come to recognize over the following weeks as the closest thing he had to genuine surprise. Then he sat, fully, back against her kitchen cabinet, legs out, Ghost's head on his thigh. Evelyn put 2 mugs on the counter. Outside, 3 floors below, Douglas Hale watched her window. He could see the warm light. He could not see what was changing inside it. He had no idea that the woman he was slowly strangling had just, entirely by accident, opened a door that would undo everything he had built. He did not stay long that first night. He stood to leave, and she walked him to the door. And before he went through it, he stopped and looked back at her apartment. At the plants, the lights, the print above the sink. "Stay. You have lived here long?" he said. 4 years, she said. "Maybe not much longer, though." She had not meant to say that. It came out the way things do when you have been holding them in too long and you're too tired to guard the door. He looked at her. "Why?" She shook her head. "It is nothing." "Good night, mister." She realized she did not have his last name. "Mercer," he said. "James." "Evelyn," she said. "Good night, James." He left. His 2 men fell in beside him in the hallway, and the elevator closed. Evelyn locked her door and slid down it until she was sitting on the floor, and she let herself cry. Not for long. She had never allowed herself long. But enough. She checked on Ghost one more time, set her alarm for 6:15, and went to bed. What she did not know was that James Mercer did not go back to Tribeca. He sat in the back of his car for 11 minutes at the curb outside her building. He made 3 calls. The first was to his head of operations, a man named Walter, who answered on the second ring, regardless of the hour, because that was simply how things worked. James told him to run a full background check on a Douglas Hale, real estate, Manhattan, and Brooklyn, everything by morning. The second call was to his property attorney. The third call was to no one. He just sat. He was thinking about a woman sitting on a kitchen floor at 1 in the morning who took off her jacket in the cold to wrap around an animal that had nothing to do with her life. He was thinking about the eviction notice he had seen on her counter. He had not been meant to see it. It was folded and set aside. But James Mercer had spent 20 years reading rooms before most people finished walking through doors. And that notice had registered the same way a weapon on a table registers. Not alarming yet. Just present. He was thinking about the words, maybe not much longer. At 7:14 the next morning, Evelyn walked Ghost slowly down Greenpoint Avenue. He was stiff but putting weight on all 4 legs, his long gray body moving with a dignity she found heartbreaking. She sent James a photo. Ghost walking, shoulder holding. "Will update after the exam." The reply came in 40 seconds. "I will be there at 9. He was there at 8:57. He sat in the waiting room like any client. Except the 2 men with him stood by the door, and the other clients in the room instinctively chose seats as far away as the space allowed. Evelyn came out from the back at 9:10, still in her scrubs, pulling off her gloves. 8 sutures, she said. He will be sore for a week. Limit his movement and change the dressing every 2 days. She paused. "Do you know what cut him?" "Yes," James said. She waited. He said nothing more. "Okay," she said. He took out an envelope and set it on the reception desk between them. I keep track of what I owe, he said. She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. I am not taking money from someone I do not know, she said. You know my name. That is not what I mean. A long pause. What would you take? He said. Not a negotiation. A genuine question that was somehow more unsettling than any negotiation would have been. Evelyn picked up the envelope and handed it back to him. Dinner, she said. Tell me about Ghost. That was the second time she surprised him. That afternoon, the results of Walter's background check on Douglas Hale arrived on James's encrypted phone. He read them in the back of his car, slowly and completely. Douglas Hale, 3 shell companies, 2 properties in foreclosure, 1 civil suit from a previous tenant, quietly settled, 1 anonymous licensing complaint filed against Evelyn Cross, veterinary technician. The email routed through a $5 service that left a trail only if you knew what you were looking for. Douglas Hale had filed it. James set the phone face down on the seat. His hands were very still. He picked up the phone and called Walter. Hale, he said, I want everything. His investors, his lender, the management company for that Greenpoint building. He paused. Quietly. Nothing happens yet. I am watching. Understood, Walter said. James hung up and looked out the window at the Brooklyn Bridge. On this side, you could see both the bridge and the borough behind it, where he was born, where she still lived. He had not protected someone who did not ask him to in a very long time. He told himself this was simply settling a debt. He almost believed it. That evening, Douglas Hale sat in his car outside her building again. He watched the 3rd-floor window. The lights came on at 6:45, which was normal, and stayed on later than usual, which was not. He did not know that somewhere across the table in a small restaurant on Manhattan Avenue, a woman with dark red hair was sharing a meal with a man whose name made people who knew it go very quiet. He did not know that everything he had built was already starting to come apart. He watched the light and felt certain. He had never been more wrong in his life. They had dinner on a Thursday at a small Italian restaurant on Manhattan Avenue with 10 tables and wine served in water glasses. He came alone. When he told Walter, Walter repeated it back like he had not heard correctly. Alone, Walter said. I am aware of the word, James said. He arrived first. He sat facing the door, which was habit and would never change. And when she walked in at 7 exactly wearing a dark green coat he had not seen before, and her hair down for the first time, he felt something move in his chest that he did not look at closely. She sat across from him and said, You are punctual. So are you, he said. I hate being late, she said. It feels like lying. She picked up the menu. So, Ghost. He told her about his brother. Not everything, just the shape and the weight of it. His brother's name was Thomas, 3 years younger, the kind of man who made every bad room a little less bad just by being in it, which was a gift in most worlds and a liability in theirs. Thomas had died 4 years ago. Someone who owed him loyalty had chosen otherwise. Thomas had trusted the wrong person in the wrong room, and by the time James understood what was happening, it was too late to be anything but after. Ghost had been Thomas's dog. James had taken him the week after the funeral, and had not told anyone what that meant, and had not said Thomas's name out loud since. He said all of this looking at the table, his hands flat beside his glass. Evelyn did not fill the silence. She understood the difference between a silence that needs to be broken and one that needs to be held. He got out because I was not paying attention, James said. I was on a call. The gate was not fully latched. He paused. 4 years, and I have never lost him before. You did not lose him, she said. He was found. He looked up at her. There is a difference, she said quietly. And the way she said it made it clear she was not only talking about the dog. He walked her home afterward, not because she asked. He simply fell into step beside her, and she let him, and they walked 6 blocks in the cold without it feeling strange, which was the strangest thing of all. At her door, he stopped. Ghost was inside. She had been checking on him twice a day since the sutures, and they had settled into a routine that neither of them named. I will come by tomorrow, James said, for the dressing change. You do not have to do that yourself, she said. I know, he said. He came the next morning, and the one after. He learned the routine of her apartment, how she made coffee before anything else, how she talked to Ghost while she worked on the wound, a steady, gentle narration that was only for the dog, how she read standing at the counter with her back to the room. He learned that she had a younger sister in Portland who called every Sunday, that she had been a competitive swimmer in college, that she kept a small notebook beside her bed where she wrote down the name of every animal she had treated that day. She had been doing it for 6 years. There were 7 notebooks on her shelf. He looked at them once when she was in the other room, and something about the discipline of it, the quiet, private ceremony of remembering, landed in him somewhere he had not expected. She told him she had written Ghost's name in the notebook that first night, before she knew his. Just Ghost, she said, and a note. Found cold. Went home warm. James was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Thank you. Not for the sutures or the gauze or the nights she had stayed up checking the dog's breathing. For the notebook, for being the kind of person who kept one. On the 8th day, Ghost was almost healed. 3 more days and the sutures would come out. The excuse for his visits was ending. James arrived at her door at 8 in the morning, and she opened it, and they stood in the doorway a moment longer than necessary. I am going to stop coming when he is healed, he said. It was not what she expected. Unless, he said, and stopped. She waited. He was not a man who left sentences unfinished. She would understand later that the unfinished sentence was the equivalent, for him, of getting down on one knee. Unless I am not done, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then don't be done, she said. That was the morning she understood she was in something much larger than a chance encounter. And the morning James Mercer admitted to himself that what he felt when he walked through her door was not a debt being repaid. It was the closest thing to peace he had felt since he was 22 years old. 3 days later, someone took a photograph of them on Manhattan Avenue, and the wrong person saw it. His name was Leonard Pruitt, 51 years old, Manhattan real estate and finance, a legitimate face on 2 commercial development fund boards, a regular at charity events, the kind of man whose photograph had appeared beside senators and whose name opened doors in rooms that ordinary money could not reach. Underneath, the silent partner in 3 of the Mercer organization's longest-standing operations, the man who had been moving money through those operations for 11 years, and the man who had been waiting with enormous patience for James Mercer to make exactly this kind of mistake. A weakness. James had not had one in 4 years. Not since Thomas. Since that last time he had let someone matter and watched what happened when the wrong people found out. He had been, by every measure, unreachable. Not just because of power, but because of the discipline underneath it. No attachments, no softness, nothing that could be picked up and used as a crowbar. Until a woman with a notebook full of names. Pruitt had 3 people watching James in rotation. When the photograph came through, James walking beside her on Manhattan Avenue, his head turned slightly toward her. Something in the angle of his shoulders that anyone who knew him would recognize as wrong. Pruitt made 2 calls. The first was to Douglas Hale. The second was to instruct his assistant to draft an acquisition proposal for a small veterinary clinic on Greenpoint Avenue and the 2 commercial properties adjacent to it. He was going to make this very simple. Remove the woman, and James would have no weak point. Install Douglas Hale as the mechanism and keep his own name clean. He had done variations of this dozens of times over 50 years. It was, he had long believed, the most reliable way to control a powerful man. Find the thing he would not sacrifice. Then put your hand on it. He did not know that he had already made the critical error. He did not know that Walter had been mapping every person in Evelyn Cross's orbit since the 3rd morning James knocked on her door, not because James told him to, because Walter had worked for James Mercer for 14 years, and he understood that the things James did not say were the ones that mattered most. Evelyn did not know any of this. What she knew was that on a Wednesday morning, 11 days after she found Ghost, she arrived at the clinic and her access badge would not work. She swiped it twice, 3 times. The light stayed red. Her colleague Helen let her in through the glass door with an expression that was careful and sorry in equal measure. "Dr. Crane wants to see you," Helen said. Dr. Margaret Crane was 63 years old. She had built the clinic from nothing over 20 years. She had hired Evelyn 6 years ago on the basis of a 30-minute interview and a reference call that apparently lasted 45 minutes. She had never in 6 years asked Evelyn to come into her office. The door was open. Evelyn sat down. Margaret slid a folder across the desk. Inside, a printed email chain. An invoice from a pharmaceutical supplier showing 2 controlled medications ordered under Evelyn's login. A second complaint, not anonymous this time, submitted with a full name and a notarized signature and 3 attached documents showing a transaction history Evelyn had never made. The name was Douglas Hale. Real name. Notarized. He was not hiding anymore. "Evelyn," Margaret said. Her voice was careful in a way that was almost worse than cold. "I have known you for 6 years. I need to believe this is not what it looks like." "It is not," Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "The login is yours. The transactions are not. Can you prove that?" She thought of Frances, her colleague who had been quietly saving emails for months, because Frances had not believed Douglas's story from the beginning and had not said so, but had documented everything just in case. "Yes," Evelyn said. "Give me 24 hours." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "I have to suspend you during the review," she said. "The licensing board is formally involved now. It is not my choice anymore." The word suspended moved through Evelyn like cold water. 6 years, 7 notebooks, every name she had written down in the dark before she went to sleep. She stood up. She did not cry. She walked out past Helen, past the waiting room, through the glass door and onto the sidewalk where the November air was sharp enough to hurt. She walked half a block and stopped. She called Frances, not James. "Frances, I need everything," she said. "Every email, every timestamp, everything you saved. Send it to me in the next 10 minutes. "Already sending," Frances said. "I have been waiting for you to ask." What Evelyn did not know was that Frances's message would arrive with something extra. A forwarded note from a former clinic employee now working in Midtown, who had mentioned almost in passing that a company connected to a man named Leonard Pruitt had recently inquired about acquiring a veterinary clinic on Greenpoint Avenue and the 2 commercial leases adjacent to it. The clinic where Evelyn worked, the building 2 doors down, where Douglas Hale had recently acquired a management stake. 2 men, connected, both pulling the same rope. At 2:15 that afternoon, a man in a gray suit knocked on her apartment door. Polite, soft-spoken, he said he was there on behalf of a business associate and that things could be made much more difficult or much more simple, depending on her choices going forward. "What choices?" Evelyn said. "Ending a new association that is drawing unnecessary attention," he said. "And if I do not?" He smiled in the way that is not a smile. "The licensing board paperwork moves to formal hearing," he said, "or it goes away. Simple choices usually are." He left a card on her doorstep and walked back down the stairs. Evelyn stood in her doorway for a long time. Ghost came up behind her and pressed his head against the back of her leg. She put her hand on him without turning around. She was thinking clearly, the way she thought when something was on the table and the margin was small, clean and precise and without the noise of emotion getting in the way. She did not call James. She went to her kitchen counter and opened her laptop, and she started building the case herself. Every document Francis had sent, the timestamps, the email chain, the acquisition inquiry. She laid it out the way she laid out a treatment plan, methodically, 1 connection at a time. And she was 90 minutes away from having all of it when James's name appeared on her phone screen. She looked at it. She did not answer. What she did not know was that James had known for 40 minutes. Walter had called him when the gray suit man was still 3 blocks from her building. James was already in his car, already driving. He was the calmest he had been all day. The anger in him had stopped moving and gone very still. And for James Mercer, that stillness was the most dangerous thing in the world. Here is what Leonard Pruitt did not understand. The moment James Mercer started appearing at a small Brooklyn apartment every morning, Walter had begun quietly and completely mapping every person connected to Evelyn Cross. Not on James's orders. Because Walter had worked for this man for 14 years, and he had learned that when James did something he had not done in years. When James went somewhere he had not gone in 12 years. When James sat on a kitchen floor in a charcoal coat, you paid attention to everything around it. By the time Evelyn was suspended, Walter had a file on Douglas Hale that went well past the fake licensing complaints. 3 months of financial activity showed that Hale had received a payment of $40,000 from a Pruitt subsidiary exactly 3 weeks before he purchased Evelyn's building. The acquisition was not coincidental. It had been commissioned. Douglas Hale had been paid, specifically and deliberately, to destroy her. That detail was important, not because it changed what James was going to do, but because it meant that Douglas Hale was not acting out of heartbreak or cruelty or wounded pride. He was a tool, which meant he had a handler, which meant the real problem was Leonard Pruitt, and the real problem had been inside James's own organization for 11 years. The meeting happened at 4 p.m. in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building on Park Avenue. James arranged it through channels that made declining inadvisable. Present Pruitt, his attorney, 2 board representatives, and Walter. Evelyn was not there. That had been James's first condition. His second condition was that 2 recording devices were placed in the room before Pruitt arrived. Pruitt came in confident. He was a man who had won by controlling information for 50 years, and he believed, reasonably, that even a mafia boss would prefer to resolve this quietly. He was wrong about who he was dealing with. James sat down. He set a single folder on the table and did not open it. "Mr. Pruitt," he said, "you used a woman to send me a message. I want to explain why that was a mistake." Pruitt smiled the way he always smiled. "I am not sure I know what you mean." "The payment to Hale," James said. "The intermediary you sent to her apartment. The pharmaceutical invoices fabricated with her login." He paused. "The purchase of a veterinary clinic on behalf of a Pruitt Holdings subsidiary, timed 3 weeks after she was first seen with me." The smile stayed. Something behind it shifted. "You were acquiring leverage," James said. "I understand the logic. I have used similar logic. But I want to be clear about what happens now." He opened the folder. The wire transfer, the invoices, the email from Pruitt's assistant that named Evelyn Cross specifically, the complete financial map connecting Pruitt to his subsidiary to Douglas Hale, dated and documented. Pruitt's attorney leaned over, looked at the documents, and said nothing. He had nothing to say. "The licensing complaint will be withdrawn today," James said, "by end of business. The Hale Management Company will transfer the Greenpoint building lease to a new entity with a 5-year locked rate. Mr. Hale will be informed that any further involvement in properties connected to Evelyn Cross will be addressed through every available means." He closed the folder. "Our arrangement ends today," he said. "The 3 commercial properties you hold through our organization will require new partners. I have already spoken with several interested parties. You will not find the terms comparable." Pruitt had stopped smiling. "You are doing this," he said carefully, "for a veterinary technician from Brooklyn." James looked at him for a moment. "I am doing this," he said, "because she is not a bargaining chip, and because anyone who treats her as one will find the cost substantially higher than a conference room conversation." He stood. "We are finished," he said. 3 hours later, Evelyn's phone rang. It was Margaret Crane. "The complaint has been withdrawn," Margaret said, and her voice was doing something it very rarely did, coming apart slightly at the edges. "All 3 complaints. The board is closing the file. I do not know what happened, and I do not need to know, Evelyn. Your badge will work in the morning." Evelyn sat on her kitchen floor. Ghost came over and put his chin on her knee. "Thank you, Margaret," she said. She hung up. She sat there for a while, then she texted Francis first. "You saved me. Every timestamp, every email. I owe you everything." Then, after a long pause, she texted James. "I know what you did." His reply came in 60 seconds. "You would have gotten there yourself." She looked at that. She thought about the 90 minutes of work she had done on her laptop. She had been close. Not all the way there, but close. "Maybe," she typed. "But you were faster." His reply, "You did not call me." She looked at that for a long time. She typed, "I did not want to need you." Silence for 4 minutes. Then, "That is not weakness. That is just you." And then, after another pause, "Can I come over?" She looked at the message. She looked at Ghost. She typed, "Yes." He arrived in 20 minutes, alone. She opened the door before he knocked because she had been watching for his headlights, and she did not care that he would know that. He came in. He stood in her kitchen and looked at her without speaking. "You are okay," he said. "I am okay," she said. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and put his arms around her, and she let him, and they stood there in the warm light, with Ghost leaning against both their legs and the city moving 4 floors below. Entirely unaware. After a while, she said into his shoulder, "The dog was how all of this started." "Ghost has always had good instincts," James said. She laughed, small and tired and completely real. "What happens now?" she said. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "What do you want to happen?" he said. And Evelyn Cross, who had spent 8 months watching her life being methodically taken apart by a man who mistook possession for love, who had carried an eviction notice and a licensing suspension and still shown up every morning and filled every notebook, looked at the man in front of her and made her choice. "Stay," she said. Above her sink, the framed print caught the light. She had bought it the week she left Douglas. She had thought it was a reminder for herself. It had always been an answer for someone else. 6 months later, the clinic was still on the corner of Greenpoint Avenue and Franklin Street, and Evelyn was still there. Badge working. Name on the schedule in Dr. Crane's careful handwriting, exactly as it had been for 6 years. Frances had been given a raise that Margaret cited in the performance review as exceptional organizational skills, which was professional language for "she saved someone I care about," and no more needed to be said. The eviction proceedings had been dropped. The building lease had transferred to a new management entity with terms locked for 5 years. Douglas Hale had, as Walter described it in a very brief update, moved on to other markets. No one who knew the full story was surprised, and no one who knew the full story said much about it. Evelyn's 7th notebook was almost full. She had started an 8th. Ghost had a bed in 2 apartments now. One in a Tribeca penthouse with high ceilings and a terrace facing the water. One on the kitchen floor in Brooklyn, beside the refrigerator, the warmest spot in the apartment, which he had claimed without asking the same way he had claimed the woman who found him. He moved between the 2 places with the certainty of someone who had never been uncertain of his welcome anywhere. James was different in the ways that matter and are hard to measure. He still ran the organization. He still made decisions that did not get discussed with people who did not need to know them. He was still the man that other men moved away from in rooms, and whose silence had weight that other men's words could not match. But something in him had come back from somewhere it had been for 4 years. Not softness. He had not become soft, but the thing that softness is made from. The willingness to let one thing matter. He came to Brooklyn 3 or 4 times a week. He brought nothing and asked for nothing. He sat in her kitchen while she worked and read and talked about her day. He had learned the names of the animals in her notebooks. He had learned, without being told, when she needed someone to talk to and when she only needed someone there. She asked him once, in the spring, why Ghost had gotten out that night. What had really happened? He was quiet for a while. "I was angry," he said. "I had been in a meeting that reminded me of Thomas. I was not paying attention. The gate was not latched." He paused. "I have thought about it. If I had not been careless." "You would not have found me?" she said. "I would not have found you," he said. She nodded slowly. "Sometimes," she said, "the thing that breaks something open is the thing you are trying to protect." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers, and that was all. And that was enough. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not walk into rooms wanting to be recognized. It does not wait for the right witness or the right moment. It finds something hurt in the dark and takes off its jacket. It keeps notebooks full of names that no one else thinks to remember. It says, "I did not want to need you," not as defeat, but as the most honest thing it knows how to say. And there is a kind of love that finds people who have spent too long performing power. It arrives at 1 in the morning, It sits down when you ask. It learns your routines and your notebooks and the way you talk to injured animals, and it stays. Not because it has to, because it looked at everything you are and decided, quietly and without ceremony, that you were exactly what it had been missing. Ghost understood this from the beginning. He always had good instincts. The only contract that mattered, in the end, was the one made on a kitchen floor at 1:47 in the morning. No words, no signature. Just a man who sat down when a woman said sit. And a woman who opened a door she had every reason to keep closed. A dog knows when it is home. Sometimes the people holding the leash take a little longer. But they get there. If you stayed with this story until the end, this one was for you. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment you knew James was gone for her? Was it when he sat down on her floor? Was it when he said thank you for the notebook? Or was it something else entirely? Leave it below and let me know. And if you want more stories like this one, where the quiet ones win and love comes to the door at 1 in the morning and stays, hit subscribe and the bell, because the next story's already on its way. It starts the same way all the good ones do. In the dark, with someone choosing to stop. End of script word count. Approximately 8,100 words, estimated narration time. 58 to 63 minutes at standard single narrator pace format. Plain text, continuous flow, optimized for single narrator voiceover recording.